I have two Neils at the moment. One Neil is a student. The other one is a teacher or head of math. And I don't know how you can tell the difference. It's a mystery to me. But we also have, and I was going to do these full introductions that I got everybody to write, but I think it's much better to just casually introduce some people. So I asked Mei Yen to come up. Mei Yen, I asked specially to join us. She's a parent with a student in FS1, like as I am. But I asked her to join us because she has a different educational background than perhaps some of us are used to. And I think that will really help us with our panel. And the other one, Malika, please come on up. Another committee member who is joining us and maybe can have some interesting approaches to how we can talk about assessment. And finally, and I'm running out of chairs, anybody else want to come on the panel? Rather, we should just do this as a round table, really, shouldn't we? Please do come up. And I'm terribly sorry, I've totally blanked on your name again, even though Ashwini, even though he's next to me in the brochure. I've blanked again. Okay, so the reason I wanted to do this panel today is something that we've been using in school. We've been using a maxim that I came up with a few schools back. I probably stole it off somebody. Some point, especially when this gets on YouTube, somebody will sue me and I will discover I did not come up with it. Some famous person came up with it. But it's the statement that all assessment matters because, and therefore, no assessment matters. Or the other way around, no assessment matters because all assessment matters. This is something that started to be used throughout the leadership as they were posting, doing training or doing presentations to the teachers or to the parents. And I've even asked them to start attributing me because it's coming up so often. But it's one of the things that has guided us as we go through this. I was listening to Camille's, and some of us were in their workshop on assessment, and we were just talking about it now. There's a danger of having an assessment when a student has a bad day. Something I say to the students in the DP is everybody will have a bad day, everybody will have a bad week, everybody will have a bad month. Hopefully we don't all have them together, but nevertheless we will have them. And if your assessment is at that moment, if that's due to some family issues or your girlfriend has broken your heart again, then you will have a bad test result. That does not define you. The ability to take one test does not define you. The ability to take one paper, I have a couple of students here who are not convinced by this at all. The ability to take one paper well does not make you a good student. It just makes you good at that one thing on that one day. So what I wanted to do to start off with is I'd just like to get the panel to talk about their assessments and what they remember from the assessments that they've had, whether that be in school or whether that be in work, in life. Where do they feel those assessments have come? How do they feel they dealt with them? And how did they cope? And Ashwini, you have the microphone, so perhaps you'd like to start. Yeah. I think so. Oh, well, please turn it on. There's a little button on there because it's connected to the. No. Let me.
Now.
There we
So assessment means I'm a believer of the fact that assessments are to be done to just check where you stand to your own self, not assessments to on a relative performance or a relative basis. So my own journey with assessment started much early in life when I was scoring zeros in a certain subject, which I have a hard time telling my daughter now that your father did get zero in mathematics, not once, but a few times. And then it turned out to be that I turned into a banker, which requires all mathematics. So it's all about how you perform against yourself versus how you allow yourself to be perceived by the rest of the world. A subtle difference being that are you giving again a belief from the world of sports. You will not have a match winner score every day. Mr. Alexander, you just said it. There could be days, good and bad. When I run my marathon in a humid condition in Mumbai on a morning Sunday, it's pathetic, but the same run when I do it for the month of January, I have an awesome result. So it's also the environment which plays the role. So how good are you doing on that particular day? Are you performing your best on the field on that day? The rest of it will fall in place. So I don't know whether it was clear enough, but I personally don't believe in assessment as a relative versus self
Yes.
test.
You reminded me then of a story I tell some of the students. There's, and I forget which Olympics, I apologize for this. There's an Olympic jumper, long jumper. I think this is something like 1974. And he jumped, he's 30 years old, and he's been performing in 3 Olympics in a row. And he jumps and he breaks the world record. Now everybody's on their feet. Everybody's thinking this is amazing. It's his last Olympics. This is his great crowning life achievement. The next jumper was a 17-year-old kid who had never jumped before and beat him by a huge amount. And so his assessment to himself was that he had finally broken the world record. He'd finally achieved that. It lasted something like 8 seconds until the next jumper did. And if he was jumping against himself, he won. But he didn't even make the podium that year. Sorry, that reminded me of that. Before we pass on to man, Neil, assessment for you. Which one do you remember the most that I give you?
In English?
Any subject you want.
Okay, so I think IGCSEs, worst assessments of my life I've ever had. Ouch. IB is going better.
It is.
But yeah, my IGCSEs were horrible. I screwed up quite a bit. In English, not that great. Math was better than my mock exams. But in IB, we pulled it up quite a bit because as Sir said, like the environment does matter in your assessments, and how you work and everything. And I do not agree that assessments are gonna still be a good thing forever. Good thing.
You mean they're not going to be a good thing for judging students, or
Yeah.
do you think it's just not something?
It's not something you can judge a student by, because I know so many people who have done really badly in assessments and then achieved a lot more than people who have gotten like 45 on 45 in IB in real life. You cannot physically judge a student or a person by an assessment. Yeah.
Thanks.
So I think the thing that comes to me when you talk about assessments was that I came from I studied primary school at a local Malaysian school. So it was very assessment based. At 7 years old, we were made to sit in desks, individual desks being assessed. And then in grade 9, I went to an international school where assessment didn't matter anymore. And I remember sitting for my IGCSEs, and I was probably one of maybe 10 people in a group of 200 who had actually sat an assessment before. Nobody else there had sat an assessment before. And I remember sitting there going like, oh, I have an advantage because I've done this before. Having said that, after graduating, today, does it really matter? It doesn't. Has somebody asked me what was my GCSE grades? No. Has somebody asked me how did I do in university? No. Has somebody even asked me where did I go to university? No. Because that I guess as a society we have moved on to accept that there is more than books. I think we grew up, even my parents were very, very focused on assessment, because that was that generation where assessments really did matter. But I think we've kind of moved on as a society today that it actually, a lot of it doesn't matter anymore.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I think I've got enough cord to get across.
Sure. So the assessment that probably sticks most in my mind was when I was 7. I had just moved from the US to India. I knew no Hindi, and I had to take we had unit tests every sort of month in every subject, and I failed Hindi miserably, 0, and I topped Sanskrit. And the reason I topped Sanskrit was because the Hindi was a written exam and I knew no Hindi, but the Sanskrit was basically a memorization. Memorize the word and repeat it. It was an oral exam. And so I topped it, but really what it demonstrated is that assessment for the sake of assessment means nothing, right? Like I didn't know either language, and yet I was able to ace one assessment and fail another. And so the way I view assessment today is that it has to be used as a tool for improvement. You know, whether it's a teaching tool or a learning tool, say, okay, this is what the child knows and this is where we need to improve. And whether that's in the school environment or the university environment, or honestly in the work environment, right? And to say, okay, this is where we need professional development.
Is there a difference there? Is there a difference between assessment and metrics? Are we in danger of sort of saying we need metrics? We need to be able to say how somebody's improving, how somebody in the long jump scenario is jumping. But is that the same thing as assessing, or are we just conflating those two terms?
I think we need information and data. Whether we get that through, quantitative data or qualitative data is the question. So you need some form of quantitative data. So when we look at this from a school committee level, for example, you want to look at we don't really look at, okay, how is the individual student performing, but we'll say, okay, what are the trends of the class? What are the trends of the cohorts? What are the trends over the last 3 years of the graduating class? How are the students performing? Are they performing to their expectations? To Ashwini's point earlier that it should be sort of a self-assessment, or are they underperforming according to their expectations? But really, it shouldn't be based on that one metric, right? It should be, maybe there's other things besides that assessment data that you also look at in terms of the health of the organization.
Neil?
Cordless. I was really interested in what you said about getting a 0 in maths and then getting a 0 in maths again. And I realized that now he's become a banker, that fits really well because it's all about getting the zeros on the right side of the number. The assessment that I remember most was when I left school at 16 because no, I don't need it. Don't need it. Anyway, and I'd taken, CSEs and O-levels in the day. And I think it was Cami or someone said very recently, who remembers what they got when they were 16? Well, let me tell you, I remember word for word because my mother read the results out over the phone when I was on holiday in France, and nothing's going to sweep that from my memory. And I left school, I knew what was going on. And after a little while, I had some great jobs. I was driving cakes, I was a hall porter, I did all factories, and it was absolutely brilliant, having a lot of fun. And I realized that there wasn't much money in this. There wasn't much direction in this. And then I taught myself, went through the assessments. Then I joined college, then I joined university. Now I've got a master's degree. And I think the key thing to there is assessment dead? No, it's not, because we won't allow it to be dead, because we haven't got enough time for somebody to say go for a job and then be a bit fluffy about it and then go off and right, well, let's all go around the house, let's go around and see what they do as a person. There is partially that. But when you are sifting people in a job, you have to see that they have the capability, and assessment always will be key. Assessment always will be necessary. I think what we have to discuss is how and what we're assessing. I think that's the key part. And the conversation I had with you briefly was that when you are assessing a group of high achievers, can you apply that same assessment on a group of people who aren't very high achievers, but maybe really going for it and really adding value to their own learning, but it still may never get to what the high achievers started at. But to them as an individual, their ability to move from almost nothing to quite a lot is something that we should, in some way, always recognize.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Thank you. So that brings us to the point of education, no matter what we talk about here today or this weekend and what we talk about in our classrooms, education is still a ticket to ride. There's still a bar that we must reach to be able to move forward into the IB, to be able to move forward into university, to graduate university and get a master's, to go into certain career paths. The government, the state, not just India, but across the world, we all set bars that we expect students to jump over. And that ticket to ride means as soon as we talk about assessment being completely dead, it doesn't work. Everybody here has a master's degree or has been successful in their field or is doing their PhD or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with the exception of Neil, who will get none of those things. No, I'm sorry. But he'll be fine. He'll be fine. But how do we reconcile that? We know that we don't want to put students back through some of the pain that we went through, sitting 1,000 assessments, sitting 1,000 tests and exams. We don't think that's healthy. We don't think that's good. But we live in a society that nevertheless, as these students over here will attest, needs A stars, right? They firmly believe in this and tell me every day. So how do we reconcile those two things? What the world requires from students and then what we as schools are providing? And I'll open that to the panel at large. Well, maybe I'll throw it to the student first. Neil spends a lot of time talking to me about universities. He's got a very particular idea on what he wants to do, and that's fantastic. He knows his pathway. He knows what he wants to achieve. He also, to a large degree, if you don't mind me saying, know where you want to go, right? Where in the world. And that means he needs to achieve certain scores. So we spend a lot of time talking about how we strategize that, how we build that, how we achieve the goals that he wants. But at the same time, I'm in class saying no assessment matters, that you're not judged by your assessment. Is that confusing for you?
Yes and no. Because, okay, so say in a particular subject I might be good at, I might know everything in it. But as you know, because I've spoken to you about this in the past, that when I go into the exam condition, when I sit the paper, I get stressed out. I blank out completely throughout the paper. So my first 15 minutes, I'm trying to remember like the basics of subject. And towards the end, I'll like get into it, I'll understand everything, and then it's too late by then. Even with my 50% extra time, it's still not going to be helpful. So I know that I know the thing, but it's also the producing part is going to be tough. And a lot of students are like me who get nervous during papers, and they might be the brightest in like the class or something, but they can't put it down on a paper and give it to you. Yeah.
Does anybody want to jump in? Sorry. It's not working. Let me pass the wire, just because otherwise it will never make the YouTube clip.
So I mean, definitely I think that, we do need assessments in this world, right? Unless the whole world is going to change to think differently, which maybe it will, but for now it's not going to. I think us as a school, what we can actually do is give the children the exposure, give the children the opportunity. When we are saying that, okay, I feel nervous in the exam, but where I personally feel if somebody has the confidence, has the self-belief, have that, I guess grit, determinants, resilience in them as something that they feel that, this is what I can do. Things, when you sit in an exam, it should come naturally. At least I like to believe that. So I feel that, as a school, we should, and yeah, we should inculcate these behaviors, from a very young age, and hopefully when they reach the time that they have to sit an assessment, because we'll never run away from it, they have the confidence to do so.
Great. Okay. So I think a lot of universities, jobs use assessments just as a means of filtration. It's an easy way to weed out people, whether it's the IIT JEE or government jobs or what have you. It's basically a form of filtering. But there is movement away from that as universities and employers realize that the skills that you need in order to succeed aren't necessarily the ones that are demonstrated on a single test. There is movement away from that. And so even in the US today, you are seeing certain colleges that have made the standardized tests, the SAT and the ACT optional. And that is a first move in the direction. So they do, of course, evaluate the applicant through other means, essays, recommendations, and GPA. But the GPA, depending on the school, is also not just exam-based, right? It's a culmination of potentially what has happened over the whole year in a subject, be it class participation, quizzes, homework, etc.
The way I would like to put it is that assessment how the school is approaching it. It should be. It has two parts to it. Assessment is important. It is going to play a role. It's about whether, as an individual, do you have the aptitude, and the second part is attitude. I'll go back to the example of my life cycle. If I had 2 or 3 setbacks like that, there was another situation and my assessment looked like a hodgepodge of what was on the scores of part of it, and there was a little external part of it, which was the extracurriculars or my aptitude versus attitude part of it. And there was this large multinational company which basically made a big public statement in front of all the students that we will only select first divisioners. Unfortunately, I wasn't a first divisioner, but I had an attitude that even if they've said this, I will still apply. Let's see what happens. I applied. They shortlisted me. I walk into the interview cabin and I said, before you ask me a question, I want to ask you a question. Why did you choose me? You made a big statement outside that you will only take first divisioners. They said, no, we like the other parts of yours. I said, that means you lied by saying what you said, that you are going to eliminate a certain score and not take. So the lesson I learned out of that means it's a different story, that I rejected them before they could even reach the next stage of the interview. But the lesson I learned from that early days, and this is about almost 30 years back, is that there's a balance, and that's what the school and as educators, as part of the committee that we all kind of think of is, are we also preparing our students with the attitude to kind of question that on a certain day or a certain score is not the only thing in life. It is important. It is a filtration method, as Malika said, that people are going to use, because assessments are done all through your stages of life. The way you dress and walk into a room, you're assessed. You're being judged at that point in time. You can call it that people are being judgy or judgmental, but it is a form of assessment that is happening in people's minds. So when you're going out to universities, to careers, your scores are going to say something, but they are not going to be the only thing that is. And again, to the point that the world is kind of giving a fair balance to others also. When I say others, is that people who do not only score, because the university system is now kind of looking at other attitudes through other systems of filtration, not just the certain scores that one gets in school or in college. So I think that's what is important at our school level, that are we teaching our students much more or beyond that score and preparing them for the larger life out there.
And following on from that and endorsing what you were saying is, when you sit an exam, what are you assessing? Are you assessing someone's knowledge in that particular subject, or are you assessing their ability to sit an exam? Now, both are valid, to be perfectly honest, because if you're going to go and work in a high pressure job, well, you have to be able to take high pressure, and sitting an exam, let's face it, is very high pressure. I think that we've been focusing on exams to get us out of school, if that makes sense. Where I think the American system, if I'm not wrong, is it's test and teach and test, teach, test. So in a state, almost every school is in the same spot and being taught the same thing, and you'll be kept down a year if you don't meet those grades. Is that right? I think we all, what I'm going to, on to say from that is I think we live in that kind of world where we think we have to teach and by testing we know whether they've got it. Now, a lot of people know how to memorize stuff, but they don't necessarily know how to apply it. And I think assessment needs to move over a lot more to the application. And let me take you just briefly, he's been talking for ages and he says the word briefly. I'm also, my main subject actually is economics, and I teach economics. And I'm just thinking, is you've got your assessment objectives. Now, when I've taught the syllabus, at A level is my experience, I start teaching students now how to pass. I'm confident that they know the topic, but I can read their essays and they won't get past the first post. So we are in an assessment situation where we are testing the skill of answering questions, which isn't a bad skill.
So I think I'm interested by the balance that you said there. We're going to get into a very teacher moment, I think. So I do a similar thing. In English, I teach a 2-year course in the IBDP in English and in GCSE. But I spend about 18 months teaching language and literature and about 4 months teaching how to do the exam. Now, you can't do the second one without the first, but you can certainly do the first one without the second. And if somebody comes out of my class and they love books, that's amazing, but they also have to get the scores at the exam, right? So there has to be a balance. And as teachers, I think we're often conflicted between our balance and how do we do that and the fear of that. As parents, is it any different? We talked a lot about soft skills here, and those of us with children, not you yet, I hope, but that's okay. But yeah, might be a good idea for you. But those of us with children, I went into my 3-year-old daughter's teacher meeting this week, and I wanted to ask, what grade is she on? I wanted to ask, where is she? What I really wanted to know is she ahead of the other kids? That's really what I wanted to know, especially some of them who I know. But it's almost innate. We as parents can't stop doing that. My office is full of parents who basically say, yes, this woolliness is all very good, and I'm glad they love literature, but what are they going to get in the exam? And as parents, are we equally at fault of that? Are we equally struggling? Opening up, yes.
Opening up?
Opening up, I thought.
Okay, so I'll kick that off with somebody who's just entered the life where daughter's gone into IGCSE. So the pressure's mounted up. It is, you're right, Alexander, that there is a conflict in the head as parents. Between the two of us as parents, we kind of balance. So I bring in, and that's important, because I bring in the attitude of saying that, did you play your best today? That's important. As long as you went in over there and played your best, it's okay. And if you think that you did not, then reflect back, because making a mistake once is pardonable. Making it twice can be ignored. Repeating that is sacrilege. Not learning from your past mistakes or improving for yourself is bad. And that's an attitude that's more important than your score that day. But if you've given your best from the process of absorbing while you're in the class, when the teachers are talking and giving you, coming home and practicing, and then delivering, if in all three your best, there's no chance in hell that you will not get a result that you were aiming for. But somewhere you have faltered if you've not got it. So check where you have. It's difficult as a parent, because you then are kind of say, hey, you didn't get your score. But the attitude is more, again, important to keep reflecting back at what else little bit I can improve.
Those soft skills.
The soft skills.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there is a conflict, right? Because assessment is a signal of how well you're progressing. But I think when I go into my class teacher meetings, I also ask the question, where is my child? Right? And obviously, and I refrain from asking what about their peers, obviously. But I think I ask that question from the perspective of, if they are not at the level they should be, what do we do to make them be at that level? It is not about, oh, I want to compare them against it, because we all know every child grows at a different pace. We all know eventually all of us will get there, and we all know eventually all of us are not good at everything. So there may be something that she's good at, something she may not be good at, and that's all fine. But I think as parents, we need to think about the cause or the reason why something they may not be where they are, and then try and work towards it. That's kind of my
Oh,
perspective.
absolutely. Great.
Did you have something?
So I have a daughter who just entered secondary, grade 6, and so she's just beginning this journey of exams and quizzes and such. And I am deeply conflicted because she seems to have a quiz now every week or so in some subject or the other, and she's always like, "Oh, I have to study. I got this grade. I've got that." And obviously, I wanted to do very well, and I wanted to perform well on those assessments. But I also see that in addition to sort of all the reasons why we think assessments, are not the best that we've discussed in this panel, I also don't want her to get sort of stressed out about it.
Yeah.
And I sort of step back and I have to think, and I ask her, did you try hard? Did you try your hardest? And did you have fun? And then when she comes back and she says, oh, I got this amazing grade in some subject, I'll be like, okay, clap for yourself. Don't do it for me. Don't prove it to me. Do it for yourself.
Unless you are a parent. No, my son and my daughter are very different. My daughter, she's just gone to Nottingham University. But she was almost crippled by this pressure during her A levels, where it was heartbreaking to see, what can I do? Can I go in? And I resented exams. And let's face it, when we're saying assessment here, assessments are many, many things. We're talking about exams. I think we're focused on exams. And I resented it. I really resented the whole system. But she knew that she wanted to get to either Nottingham or Bristol. And she was determined it was going to happen, to the point that she was so scared she was going to let herself down. She thought she'd let us down. It wouldn't have been that. And I hated it. I really, really, as a parent, hated it. Whereas my boy, he couldn't give a damn. I cleaned that up.
Yes, well done.
He couldn't give a damn. So he got a really high result in English because he knew how English was assessed. He never read a book, never read any of the English books that was set.
Yeah, but sorry, Neil, can you close your ears?
Yeah. Yes, but he knew, he was taught how to pass the exams. Okay, so, and he kind of left school with very few qualifications. Then went out to work for McDonald's, and like his dad, he decided, hang on, this isn't so good. He is now a teacher. So it's very different. How I think the point I know the point I'm making is that students or your kids, your offspring, see assessments differently. So that means that every single person in the class may have different levels of how they see and approach assessments. And I do apologize for dismissing the whole having to read books in English thing.
Yeah, especially in front of my English student.
Yes.
No, don't say that into the microphone. Okay, I would like to open it up for questions. But before I do, I think we have to tackle one of the things that's been recurring throughout today, which is AI, and what that's going to do to assessment as we move forward. I was talking with the IB leaders in the last few weeks, and Britain is changing its approach. They want no non-exam assessments as part of the university pathway. They want only, in the next few years, only for exams or exams to be the only way of measuring a student. No coursework, no AIs, no IAs, sorry. And the reason for that is obviously AI. The reason for that is they're worried that the coursework can be replicated, can be produced by machine, and therefore is useless. Other countries, other areas are going the opposite way, where they're no longer interested in exams. I think those of you who were in Camille's workshop before were hearing how good ChatGPT is at taking the LNATs, and it's far better than I will ever be. And so they're going the opposite way, that the only thing that matters is GPA. The only thing that matters is how a student performs regularly over time and how, whether or not that is a real assessment in the class. As panelists and as parents and educators and students, how do you feel AI is going to impact in the future? Let's start with the student first. I mean, you are literally the guinea pig with this. You are the first year where you can really engage with AI on your assessment.
Okay, so one question first.
Yeah.
This applies from next year, right?
Yeah, I will still fail you if you tell me things, yes.
No, like for UK universities, it applies.
Yeah, it's an option.
Okay, I'm fine then. Okay, so in our grade, everyone does use the AI, and our teachers do support it to an extent where you have to change everything in it. Like, yeah, but you still do support it. You'll teach us how to use it because it's the one place where you get all the information, other than searching on Google Scholar for like 300 different sites and putting it into our extended essays or IAs or etc. But we can't really use it during an exam as it is because, well, you're.
But you have courses that are 45% non-exam sets. So 45% of your grades are there before you get there.
Fair enough, but you have to turn it in also that does not allow us to use the AI. It detects every sentence we use an AI in, and we have to change it by the end of it.
Do you think it's helping you approach your learning, or do you think it's just a tool for getting past certain barriers?
So it depends. If you'll set us an assignment in class and we really don't want to do it, we go to AI and do that.
Okay, that's depressing.
Yeah. But, so we also want to watch Netflix in class once in a while.
I do not.
So a lot of students might want to watch Netflix in class once in a while, but you'll still supervise our classes, so you don't have a choice. But if it's marked, we use the AI for the information. We use it as a reference, which we are allowed to do as we can use Google also. But we do have to change. We have to change the writing. We have to understand what the AI is giving us and interpret it in our own words by the end of it. Otherwise, we're gonna be caught for plagiarism and we'll fail the entire IB.
So it's a tool, not a.
It's a tool.
It's collaboration, not collusion.
Yeah. So a lot of us in our 2 months of the summer between grade 11 and 12, I started with my extended essay. I spoke to you about it, but we can't keep coming back to a teacher and asking them, okay, how do I improve on this? What do I do now? So we use the AI instead because the teachers also not always available for us at our beck and call.
And we're limited by the amount of hours.
Yeah, we all are limited by that as well, but still, like, the AI can, like, we upload our document into ChatGPT and ask them, like, where do I improve? How do I get my grade higher? And what can I do to improve on it? And they give us a list of points. We ask them for the information. We understand it. We can also ask ChatGPT if it's like a too high level of like whatever it gives us to explain it to us. We tell them, like, can you explain it to us in like great detail? Like, how do I do this? What information have you given me? And where can I improve? Should I do a survey on something? Like for my math it was on like my sport polo, which I changed sadly, but yeah, but it was on polo. So I asked ChatGPT, like, what should be in my survey? What questions should I ask? And how can I get that good grade from my survey itself?
Okay. Good. Thank you for the honesty, although we are now blocking Netflix. Yes. Yeah.
Can I just say that it's interesting what Neil was saying about how he uses AI, artificial intelligence, which I don't think is artificial intelligence. Really, it's just a good program. You were using it in an intelligent way, and that is by asking how you were going to do it. So, do you think sort of that the British approach to cutting all project work is a good thing or a bad thing, or do you think students will start using it in an intelligent way rather than just doing the work for them?
So in my case, like I always said from before, I want to be an architect or I want to go into construction by the end of my school years, all of that. After college, I want to go into construction, become an architect and all. So for me, I feel AI would be helpful where it can help me plan out projects. It can help me make plans. And right now I saw like online that AI is also helping design buildings. So it's all helpful and no one is actually going to catch you on it in the real world. No one is going to care as long as you produce the work. So
that goes back to what our friend here, I can't remember your name, always goes. So AI, and I'm going to use your phrase, AI is okay, but it doesn't exist without HI, which is the human intelligence, isn't it? And it's always going to be, because the AI that we have at the moment is 2, 3, 4 years old, and it's not intelligent. Anyway, we did a test on it. Is that my son had said, right, name the first five emperors of Rome, and one of them came up as Julius Caesar. And he said, well, technically Julius Caesar wasn't an emperor, so he sent it back to GDP, whatever it is. I do that because I'm an economist. What is it? GGPT, okay. AI. And they said, they went, oh, our bad. Thank you for telling us. You're quite right, and all that sort of business. And they did all this. Well, yeah, we haven't quite got it right. So I thought I'll test it because intelligence is about taking what you know. If you make a mistake, that's okay. But you now know that that was a mistake, so you don't make it again. Anyway, so my ex-wife, but it doesn't matter, she then put in from somewhere else, she goes, name the first 5 emperors of Rome. And it came out with Julius Caesar on it again. So it's not intelligence. It's just sweeping information that's been put there. It's just a gathering system. It's nothing intelligent about it. It's pretty cool. Yeah. But it's not doing anything really for you. And there will be that point where it's so similar, everything that is gleaned from AI, well, what is called AI,
Sure.
It's just not going to be of any value.
All right, wonderful. On that note, let's open up for any questions from the audience. Does anybody have anything they would like to say? Yes, please. Neil, can you do me a favor? Being young, he's still able to. Yeah, right.
This is not so much a question, but just a reflection on the whole AI discussion. It's actually evolution, if you see. I mean, in our time, we didn't have the internet. We had to read 6 different textbooks and write out notes. For the next generation, there was internet and wow, Google was such an amazing thing. I think this is just the next stage of evolution to aid learning. Is it going to replace learning? Probably not. And probably 10 years later, this is going to be old and there'll be something else there. And it's also what the demands of the environment are today and how they've been changing as well. So I guess it's just a stage in the whole evolution process.
No, I love that. Yeah, and especially even your point then of textbooks. I'm sure there was a person when they invented textbooks who said this is cheating. We shouldn't put all the information in one book. We should put them. You should go to the Library of Alexandria and work it out for yourself.
Primary data gathering.
Exactly. Any last questions? Yes, please.
Hi, so I'm a mom, and what I realized is like, let's say when the pencil was invented, okay, when we let go of the pen where we had to dip it in the ink and use it. The ballpoint pens were invented, and then we started using them, right? So I'm just thinking that this is here to stay. AI is never going to go. Like the internet is not going to go. It came and it never left. AI is never going to go. So shouldn't the assessment be about how you can use it best and come up with something instead of like avoiding it? Because it's not in the this is not like it's a lab environment, right? It's not
Right.
real in the real world. If
Is
you
it
if you
what-
leave AI outside your life, I mean outside the assessments, it's a lab environment. It's not real.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they step out, it's always there.
It's like trying to do math without a calculator. It's almost pointless. You're going to use a calculator at some point. What do our panel think on that? Has anybody any thoughts or any reflections?
I was going to say something similar in terms of the evolution part of it. If you just look at the education system, in centuries back, it was one-on-one.
Yeah.
There was no paper, there was no books. Then came a book, then came libraries. So it's only what you're saying is right. As long as we can teach that how to use the information, all it has done is further democratize information. What was available centuries back only between a master and teacher, one-on-one, it has now democratized information. How you use that information is what a teacher's and a parent's job is going to be in the education system, to be able to make the next generation to be more informed, and therefore the assessment system needs to go back and evolve itself to catch up with that. That AI is here to stay, the same way the internet was here to stay, the same way books were here to stay, things like that.
I want to endorse your point where you said, why should we be scared of it? And you're right, is that when computers first came in, schools were very slow to use computers in schools because they didn't really know what they were going to use it for. And I think we're at that stage where we're using this new system. I again refuse to call it intelligence because I don't think it is, but it still is it's like you said, Google, when that came out, it's just a really good Google. And I think it's with calculators. When they first in schools, people said, no, it's not going to happen. But we still read like sine, tangent, and cosine. And how you were saying what it was like when you went to school. I'm sure you remember those books and the slide rule as well for various things. Is that it's a technology that people don't know how to use. But when the competitors come to Chat GPT, yes, is that then that's when it's going to start morphing into a very usable system. It's when the one on its own is not usable because they're driving it. We need demand now to drive what AI is about, or what isn't AI.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. We do have to tie things up. I think this is the beginning of a conversation rather than the end, and one that no doubt every education facility will have over the coming years, and one we hope that parents and partners will continue to be part of. Please give a warm round of applause to our panel who did amazingly. And I need to tell you that one talk has already started on downstairs. If you'd like to join it, there will be a student showcase in a few minutes on this stage. Thank you very much. Thank you.